In the 10th century, the Persian traveler Ibn Rusta went to Novgorod, probably, and he wrote about the Varangians there, that the Rus, that when a son was born, the father would go to the child and, throwing a sword at its feet, say, "I leave you no property but what you can take with this sword." And now you might think, that's kind of harsh. That's kind of a dick thing to say. But really, if you think about it a little bit more, it's not that bad. I mean, in those days, a sword was worth, in modern terms, like a new car. And in weaponological terms, that's like a fine-ass rifle with some fine-ass optics and all your gear and maybe a general-purpose machine gun. And, not only that, but there's the moral support. The father's going to train the son to use this advanced weaponry. And is going to tell the son, I've raised you to be a badass. And being a badass is a noble and honorable thing. Now go out and get some. So, it's definitely not nothing. It's a hell of a lot more than the boomers have left us. Because, they certainly didn't leave us much in the way of weaponry. Not anything equivalent, certainly. And in general, we have to provide our own weaponry. But in addition to that, we have to provide our own moral support. Because on top of the debt, the financial debt, and the public debt that the boomers have saddled us with, they've also saddled us with a great burden of moral debt that they assumed on our behalf and passed down to us. In swallowing all these anti-white, anti-Western narratives that induced them to hand over our birthright, to hand over our country, to hand over our entire inheritance to ungrateful aliens, to ungrateful outgroups. And those same narratives that the boomers have swallowed, that induced this white guilt and induced them to hand over our birthright, have also emboldened these outgroups, these hostile aliens, and have imbued them with a sense of grievance and entitlement, an insatiable sense of grievance and entitlement. So, really, that inheritance that a Varyag in Novgorod could expect, the sword and the moral support and being raised in the ways of the warrior, that's a much grander inheritance than the boomers have left us. They've left us a world of shit to wade through. But they haven't left us the tools, either physical or moral, to wade through it. Those we have to forge for ourselves. And we have to find that moral license. We have to find that moral legitimacy within ourselves. And we have to craft that and distribute that and, legitimize that for ourselves. And we're doing a pretty good job, I would say. We're doing a pretty good job, and we've done a pretty good job in a pretty short time of granting ourselves that moral license, of granting ourselves that legitimacy to exist and to seek and to defend our own interests. And we're only going to keep that up. And, by all accounts and by all the available evidence, the generation coming up after us is doing even better on that front. The moral bankruptcy and the intellectual bankruptcy of the boomer narratives is obvious to those of us who have to bear the full costs. The boomers can afford it, or they could afford it, or they thought they could afford it. We can't, because they've already squandered their advantages. They haven't passed them on to us. They've already squandered their privileges. They haven't passed them on to us. And so here we are, in a world beset by these hostile aliens, surrounded by these hostile narratives that embolden these hostile aliens. And to accept these narratives is death. And to reject them is our only chance of survival. And so, you know, that's what people are doing. That's what the younger generations are doing. You know, some millennials, not all, obviously. Most millennials are dildos. And Generation Z much more so even than millennials. Rejecting these narratives and adopting their own. Rejecting this moral debt and adopting their own. Oh, and by the way, we're not paying for your fucking retirement and healthcare either. So let's just clear that up right off the bat. You know, thanks for everything, boomers, and don't expect anything in return. Don't expect any more or any better in return than what you left for us. And that's pretty shit. So you're looking at some pretty shitty declining years. You know, you better hurry up and die pretty quick if you don't want it to get as bad as it's going to get for you personally.